Good morning. We're running a few minutes behind. Had a great discussion with the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. It's always a lot of information. And I think probably we would have scheduled 2 hours. We could have filled that and then run over as well. We're going to spend some time this morning on S60, an act related to establishing the Farm Security Special Fund to provide grants for farm losses due to weather conditions. That bill has had wide-ranging support on both sides, and as much as it's had support, it's had some difficulties going through some of the committees on the House side for whatever reason. I've asked Senator Plunkett to break down with what we've got back from the House. Senator Plunkett and I had some discussions with some folks the other day, so I just think I think that Senator Plunkett is better served to break this down than most. So, Senator Plunkett, go ahead. Floor is yours.
And thank you, Chair Ingalls. And I want to start off by saying that I discussed it a little bit with Michael O'Grady, who's the Ledge Council drafted the bill. He did provide us with a side by side and a section by section, which are on our committee page. So this is really his more or less presentation. I'll have a bit more, but I can say that perhaps he couldn't say. But if Linda, if you could pull up the side by side section for the folks.
Oh, that's the wrong one, isn't it?
That's the wrong one.
Yeah.
That's the section by section. But just for the committee, we went through this last year. We know the bill, but the fundamentals are that it's establishing a security fund. We had it for farms solely to respond to disasters like we've been having, floods, drought, that sort of thing. So that would be more of a rapid fund to recoup losses for farms. So we passed it. It went through. It's administered by Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets. The awards are given by a review board of certain stakeholders, different representatives of the different categories. So went over to the House, and as I think we had discussed and we had expected, forestry was added to it. So the title of the bill would now be an act relating to establishing the Farm and Forestry Operations Security Special Fund to provide payments for farm and forestry operation losses due to weather conditions. And there we have the side by side, and the side by side has the highlights like we've seen before. Those highlights are the changes. So the left hand side S60 as we passed it, S60 on the right as the House passed it. The section 1 is findings, and none of the findings are really operational. Findings are used to interpret the statute, presumed by courts if it comes to maybe by the agencies in their implementation. Much of it is just changing the definitions, some of the language, adding forestry overall to our findings, but it's still the same of recognizing the need for security fund for farms, forestry operations, for stream implements. The definition section, you can scroll down, Linda, to section 2. Yeah, and you'll see that it's a different subchapter and different statute numbering. That's because we passed another subchapter last year that subsumed that subchapter, so they had to renumber that. That's the only reason for that. Jumped off. These two definitions just adds forestry. Essentially, it clarifies a little bit what a fire event is, and forestry operation is cross-referenced to definition Title 10. Scroll down to 4642. And I will learn how to do this so that I don't have to do it every time. That section just adding forestry operations. 4643 has a little bit more added. So adding forestry operations, and one change that I think is wise was they changed the word grants that we had to payments. Grants is a specific term that I believe carries certain requirements in the state. So calling it payments for sort of restriction it might have.
And this, you haven't changed that yet, because I still see it says grants, so.
No, on the right-hand side, that's how it's passed. That's how it came back to us from the House. It says
Yeah,
payments.
so the one on the left is, the one on the left, Senate have read.
Yeah, I'm
And
looking.
the one
at
on
it
the
here.
right is,
Yeah, the right one is the one that we're discussing.
Yeah. But if you go down, as we go down a little bit further, it's just
There's another one.
listed any state, but I guess grants. I guess.
Oh, that's a different thing.
Okay.
We'll get to
All
that.
right, yep, I'm jumping ahead, sorry.
So payments, it also talks about what the payments would be. It puts a couple of more limitations on it. As we had discussed, we kind of knew that this would be a fund that would not be enough. And it's supposed to be rapid, or as rapid as possible to farms and now forestry operations. And some of the concern has been, well, it's first come, first served. This fund is going to be dwindled very quickly. So part of the limitation that the House added was adding the word under-reimbursed. So if a farm or forestry operation has already been reimbursed for the loss, they can't get away with it. And it's fairly straightforward. Yeah. And I think it also, and this will be perhaps part of how the Agency of Ag implements it, that if they know they're going to be reimbursed, they wouldn't be able to get the payment then, but that I think will be part of the procedures. The other and perhaps more substantial limitation is that the maximum annual award it would be up to a maximum annual award of 5% of the undesignated and unreserved funds of the Farm and Forestry Operations Security Special Fund at the beginning of each fiscal year, provided that the award shall not exceed $150,000 per qualified applicant farm or forestry operation per year. So what we had, the Senate had, was a limitation of not more than 150,000. This pins it to the 5% of whatever is in the fund, presumably on July 1st is the beginning of the fiscal year. And so that'll mean, if there's only $1,000 in it, it's $50. That could possibly be awarded as maximum.
I think Senator Plunkett and I had some conversations, nothing that was on the line or anything like that. And I think the agency might have some concerns about somebody coming in and depleting all the funds. But from what I'm seeing in the language, that there's a maximum award, but there's no minimum award.
Right.
And so it doesn't mean that if there's $1 million in there and 5 people apply, that they all get $150,000. I don't see that in here. Am I missing that?
No, I think that's right. And if the total 5% was awarded to each applicant, then that would be through 20 applicants. So it does at least establish that there could be 20 applicants that could get some award. But
Yeah, no matter what the money is.
yeah, no matter what the money is. And right now the money is zero. So
And that's maximum. That's maximum. I mean, it could be, they could decide to make that smaller.
yes. Yes,
Okay.
and that will be up to the review board on what the payment would be and what the losses are. And that brings us to, my screen keeps jumping around, so I apologize. That just needs to roll.
What's down?
Yeah, if we can scroll down to where am I trying to go? Page 5. Yeah, up a little bit. Keep going up a little bit. These are the definitions of losses. So, okay, so on page 5, you'll see the list of losses that are reimbursable. So these are the losses that a farm or forestry operation can apply to have reimbursement for. It adds obviously timber, logging roads, and inability to harvest timber. So most of that is just adding forestry products to it, but it does limit to some degree what losses can be compensated. And if we can keep scrolling down to the body and stop right there. So subsection B here, the secretary shall develop a streamlined application for awards under this section that shall include a list of what the application is going to require. The House added a requirement for the applicant to list any state grants or loans received for their operations in the past 5 years, including amount, source, purposes of funding. So that does add a little bit of paperwork for the applicants. Presumably, this is something that perhaps the agency of ag already has, so they'd be able to supply it themselves, or I don't know this, whether operations have clear records of that, they can quickly do that.
Any reason they put that in there? They didn't want some business getting more money than another if they've been getting over the last 5 years?
I believe that's correct, and it doesn't necessarily limit the award. It just adds another bit of information for the review board to look at before making an award. And it might be that, just going to take some hypothetical, that some two-goat farm operation had been granted $1 billion 5 years before, and now they're asking for $100,000, and there might be some question of whether or not that's a loss that should be reimbursed. And if you keep scrolling down, Linda, I'm just gonna look at the big screen because my screen keeps jumping around.
Where do you want to be?
Right there. This is the changing fund to secretary. That's just a little bit of cleanup to make it clear that it's the secretary of the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets that establishes the application process.
Can you go up just to sub 5? 4 on our side and 5 on theirs.
Okay, down a little
To
bit.
me, that's well, I don't know if it's a very substantial change, but instead of using Schedule F,
Oh, okay, yeah.
you just have to report.
Yeah, their income. Sorry.
I don't know what the rationale was. Was it maybe to facilitate paperwork on the farmer's end? But to me, they're already filing a Schedule F.
I think I'm assuming, and I did not research this, and I apologize for that. We can ask Attorney O'Grady on this, but I believe that Schedule F is exclusively for farming. And
It is.
forestry is not, would not have a Schedule F. So instead of specifying
Yep.
income and expenses, it just talks about income and expenses in all of its forms.
Yes, I get it.
In one way that the farm could do it, it could really be Schedule F. And it scroll down to the bottom of, right there, Linda, thank you. And the House, I think, wisely added that the secretary can pay their reasonable administrative expenses from the fund, so that this doesn't add an additional burden on the agency that is otherwise funded. So we can go down. Yeah, and this establishes the review board. Obviously, it adds forestry operations, adds the commissioner of forest parks and recreations, and also further down, we'll see 2 forestry operators. that are added to the review board. So this has stakeholders regarding forestry, which makes it a relatively large board. And there was some discussion of, well, we have this other board that's going to review the applications and give the awards. Is that something that will be a bottleneck? And the anticipation is that it wouldn't be. Presumably they can come up with procedures to make it relatively rapid. But the rapidity of it, I believe, is at maximum once the application is complete. It goes to the board. I believe it's a total of 30 or 60 days before the award is supposed to go out. So that is pretty rapid. But
I know the agency was concerned about that, but if we are to do with what we were trying to do, which I think you've said it perfectly at the beginning, was to quickly get the money out the door. It is what it is. It might make some people uncomfortable, and at the end of the day, if it can't happen, it can't happen, but we might as well try to make it quick money.
yeah, and I know many of the awards that are granted by the state are done by boards who do a review. So it's not just a state agency presenting some sort of money. And I don't know if it would be a question of I guess trust in the board, knowing that there are some of their own operators on the board that know or in the field. There is an addition to the board. There's a term limit for the board members, and perhaps, and also I think wisely from the House added a conflict of interest section. So folks that are on the board have to comply with the conflict of interest that I think everyone in the state has to comply with. And anything else till the last page, just adding forestry to it. If we can take a look at the last page. So this is a new section, contingency of funding. And what this does is, so the general scheme we have is that the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets will set up the program. And the contingency of funding is saying, well, the agency doesn't have to do that until this is funded by the General Assembly. So even if there are funds from outside, my reading of this is that setting up the fund would not be, there wouldn't be a duty to implement until the General Assembly appropriates funds in fiscal year 2027 or later. That maybe is worth some discussion, whether or not the agency, if there was funding, regardless of whether it was appropriated, whether they would do it. Doesn't restrict them, but it has the duty to be only after it's appropriated. And that is the new bill. So other than that one question on whether or not the fund can be set up even without a General Assembly appropriation, or if it would be, I think it's essentially the same as what we agreed to. And tossed over to them with the addition of forestry, obviously. And frankly, from hearing from today, the integration of farms and forests sounds to be a lot more than I had known before. So it does make sense to add forestry.
So unanswered questions as far as it, so let's just talk broadly. If we wanted to pass this bill out like right now.
Yeah.
Okay, could we do that?
Absolutely.
Everybody happy with that?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about what we're gonna do then. Yes,
Well, I do have, I don't know if it's a question or just a clarity issue. It presents in this, on this side of the General Assembly, a little bit of a wrinkle since we don't have jurisdiction over forest products. So that natural resources does. So that's one thing, and I don't know whether that's enough to. In other words, it could go somewhere else, even if we pass it out of this committee. I don't know whether it would or not. But the second question, it seems to be silent on an external appropriation. And I don't know what that means exactly if miracle of miracles, we happen to find somewhere else to find some funding for this.
Yeah.
Would the agency of ag still be able to implement this, or it's not clear to me. It just says that the duty to implement is contingent upon, again, a general fund appropriation. But if it's not a general fund appropriation, what do we do?
My reading of it is that they have authorization to do it.
Oh,
If
okay,
the General Assembly appropriates funds, they have to do it.
okay,
But I don't think they would be required to if there was money that was funded in. And to answer your question on outside sources, the definition of the fund, and this is section 4642. It's on page 3 of the side by side. The fund shall consist of funds transferred by the General Assembly, funds from public and private sources, secretary accepts for the fund, and funds from federal government aid or state support of farmers or forestry operations suffering income loss due to weather conditions. So funds can come from anywhere. Setting up.
So that's answered to your satisfaction?
yeah,
Well, okay,
I get it.
okay. So I think, okay, so let's just, any more questions about if we want to pass this out right now? Could we pass it out? Any more questions about that? Everybody in agreement, they could be fine with that?
Even the few questions I brought up aren't questions enough for me to not agree to pass it right now.
Okay. So I think that we ought to give Senate Natural Resource a drive-by on this and have them look at the language so that we're not stepping on their toes. And then, I want to keep possession of the bill, but I'll just have them to look at the language. And then, I kind of had, talked with them informally, but they haven't seen the language. I don't know, maybe they have, but they haven't seen it from us. And then other than that, I don't mind having it here for a little while longer to further some discussions, but then at some point in time, we should just pass it out.
Can I just talk to a broader
Absolutely,
question?
that's what we're doing.
And it's not specific to S60, but a broader question. Obviously, the House has forestry in their attached to their act.
Yeah.
We don't, and it's sometimes, and this is a case of that, is problematic.
Yeah.
Because there are drive-bys or where, I guess my question is, and I defer to the elder statesman in the room. Can we?
Somebody must have come in.
We call them old.
Elders, a sign of respect.
And yeah, that's what I thought, and I don't know if we want to take over forestry, just so that there is,
No question.
so there's continuity. And we're not having to, because it adds an extra step to what we do. On a continual basis. This isn't the only bill that there's been some situation.
Well, I think that's a discussion to have with the pro temp.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good discussion to have. We did the same thing in our other committee. with institutions, because before you guys were in there, we didn't have, when Brian and I were in there, we didn't have the prisons. And that was in judiciary, and we got that moved from judiciary back to institutions, which it wasn't institutions to begin with, but then it got put into judiciary. And so it does happen. A movement of subjects, departments do happen. So I think that's a good discussion to have.
I can spearhead that and come back and
Yeah,
report to the,
that sounds
to the
good.
committee.
Sounds good.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it just, cause,
Grows in the ground.
yes.
Erosion happens on logging trails quite often. And, you know, and I think that's why it sits over there for whatever reason.
Well,
But it's like our farmland gets eroded as well. And we're gonna deal with it here.
I think there's a lot of reasons why things get moved around. I know one institution's part is because, Senator Sears at that time wanted to control that. And that's what he did. And I'm sure at some point in time, if we look back far enough, there was a reason why, you know, and it might not just be that, because at one time, agriculture wasn't even a full-time committee. It was actually a third committee. So there were people that had their two regular committees, and then ag was the third committee. So, and they didn't meet every day. So, but, you know, so it's changed.
A little history lesson.
Yeah, so maybe it just hasn't got switched over, but I think that's a good discussion to have, and I appreciate if you would spearhead that.
Yep.
Okay, so I just want to make sure, the committee's in agreement that will, I'll have a chat with the, chair of, economic, development, or, natural resources, and ask that they do a drive-by on the bill, and that we'll still have possession of the bill, and that, we'll sit on this for another few days in the next week, see what happens. There are some discussions going on, ongoing discussions going on, but at some point in time, we will have to just pass this out. And Senator Plunkett, you answered this question because I was gonna ask it, but with what you went back and read again, you're comfortable saying that any of the dollars that come into this fund can be dispersed by the Secretary of Agriculture.
They could set up the fund even if there is a general assembly appropriation.
Okay,
And then steward the process and then the review.
so the language is in there well enough to where we wouldn't have to ask for a language change if all of a sudden we got some monies from an outside source.
I believe that's.
Good? We good?
Yeah.
Senator Plunkett, thank you for that. Appreciate it
No
very,
trouble.
very much. Yeah, very great job. Yeah, I think you have you know, if you ever wanted to be an attorney, you might have a. So, thank you for that. And, any questions? We have like some folks in the room. You hear our plans, hear what we're trying to do. Okay, okay,
But before we go on,
yes.
I do want to put on the record, I was gonna make this joke before, then decided not to, but I will. It's not, it is only half of a joke, but I saw this as sort of my interview for legislative council.
Yeah.
Because I have such great respect for all of the legislative councils that we've worked with, and they work miracles, so.
Yeah, they do. They work hard.
I deeply appreciate them.
Oh, good. Okay, so we're gonna call it a day. We'll go off, and thank you everyone for a good morning.
Thank you.
Good.